My name is Karolina Lewandowska, and I'm part of Google for Work organization. So basically what my organization does, we take the consumer products, such as Gmail, Calendar, Google Docs, we wrap it up nicely, and we decided to offer it to businesses. And my role in particular is I'm a change and transformation manager, the best job ever. Basically, I work with large and small organizations globally, mainly with our partners, and I help our customers to prepare for the coming change and implement it from the user adoption perspective. So I basically focus on communication and training. So I'm happy, I will be talking to you on a slightly different topic today, but if you have any questions, change management related, I'm happy to answer those questions during one of the breaks, okay? All right, so let's just start. I must say that the previous presentation was a brilliant setup for the presentation the slides that I will be showing you today. So that's basically the picture of Google Office in Victoria. That's, as I just literally explained, that's the top floor of one of the offices where we've got the natural light, and that's one of the collaboration spaces. So that's how it looks like. We basically, next to it, we've got coffee corner, some pastries, some snacks, and this is how we work. So basically, what I'm going to do today, I'm going to start with some of the technology trends that I've observed in the past. I've been working on Google Apps and working for Google for the past 6 years. So I'm going to share some of the trends that I think will be, very important for human resources and how technology fuels that transformation. Then I'm going to move on to the Google's culture. I'm going to share with you some bits and pieces of the secret sauce, how we rock and roll internally. And then the last bit is going to be about innovation. I know that there are plenty of discussions around, how to foster innovation internally. There are some tips that I put together that might be inspirational for you or might be just the confirmation of something that you're already doing, okay? I would like to make it as informal as possible. If there are any questions as I go through the content, please just raise your hand and I'm going to address the questions as we go, okay? We will have some dedicated time towards the end of the session, but if there is something that you would like me to comment on as I go through the content, please feel free to stop me. Okay, so because of the technology, technology is basically a key enabler for all the transformation, all the cultural changes that are happening now. And basically, due to technology, we are not anymore chained to our desks, depending on the job, of course, but we are not chained to our desk, but we observe certain other trends that are actually influencing the way we operate internally in the workspace. So first of all, working on different devices is becoming more and more standard, right? If I ask you a question, how many of you have mobile phone that you can check your corporate emails on? Probably the majority of you would say yes. That becomes a primary device to do anything and to basically perform on certain things, right? When it comes to other trends that we observe, bring your own device to work or working from home is becoming business as usual. A few years back, it was still like a new thing to many organizations. They were just starting to introduce those two opportunities to employees. Right now, it becomes a standard. We don't talk about it anymore. That's more like, usual thing. Another thing that I wanted to mention are the 4 generations, something that I probably to this audience I don't have to explain. But basically, due to technology, we also, facing the new generation, millennials, that they basically, when they enter the workforce, I've seen the statistics recently that by 2020, millennials will make up 50% of the global workforce. So when you think about this particular generation, we have to be ready internally we have to be attractive as an employer to those people as well. And these are the people who don't know the concept of being offline. They basically book holidays, submit assignments, collaborate with their colleagues without moving from their sofa, and that's expected, right? And basically, we need to be ready for this particular group as well internally. One more thing that I've seen very interesting recently is that Cisco did a study, and apparently 45% of young professionals would accept a job offer with better technology than higher pay. That tells you quite powerful story as well, right? So people actually have a look at what type of technology is being used in the company while applying for a job, right? If I ask you a question right now, how many of you feel that you use better technology at work than you have at home? How many of you? Okay, not so many, 5 people. Okay, so that reflects the reality as well, right? So we basically, as organizations, and these are the conversations that I'm having oftentimes with executives. I'm being lucky enough to being exposed to those conversations. What actually motivate organizations to go digital, to move to some of the Google solutions, to move to cloud and all that stuff. It's just basically because they want to be competitive and appealing to this particular group, right? To the millennials. And obviously, together with technology, there are new ways of collaboration being possible as well. So the way we share things, the way we work. It used to be the case that email was our to-do list, was the primary tool. At the moment, it's actually more, for example, when you use Google Docs, by the way, this presentation is Google Slides. I was asked to bring the memory stick. I haven't used the memory stick for the past few years, so I decided to log in simply once you have the Wi-Fi access, or if you don't have the Wi-Fi access, offline works as well. And you can, you've got everything stored in the cloud and it's nicely accessible. Imagine if I lost that memory stick without an opportunity to log in here. I wouldn't be able to present those slides to you today. So basically, there are different ways of working, and what we've observed as well, there is this cultural shift happening as well, especially when it comes to performance management, from HR perspective, making sure that people actually, the discussion that, the slides that Oliver presented this morning, making sure that employees are being more efficient, but also more happy, is also one of the ways of giving them a chance and a choice where they want to work for and how they want to work, right? So that's one of the trends that we've observed as well. So all those things like creating together, meeting and connecting, more and more it's actually easier, and that's what we do internally at Google. We actually, if I need to discuss something with my colleague, I do a quick video conference. We call it Hangouts. Quickly discuss something, you can dial in on your mobile, I can see the face, I can do the screen share. Very quickly we can discuss certain things, and I don't need to send an email and wait for this person's response to actually move on with my project, right? So something I mentioned before, that Gmail is not a to-do list anymore, mail is not a to-do list anymore. It's more about, getting straight away to the document you're collaborating in, and really limiting the number of channels that you're using to achieve your goal, right? That's what technology enables us nowadays. And not even mentioning that from HR, from hiring perspective, the workforce is changing as well, because if you enable remote working, you can actually hire someone sitting in Singapore when your headquarters is in London, right? That's possible as well because of the technology. So, very interesting stat, 71% of CEOs see technology change as the #1 factor influencing their organization within the next 3 to 5 years. That was IBM study. And actually, that's probably something that you hear in your organization very often. Either it's part of your mission, or your refreshed mission, or the vision that your C-level board members are presenting. We either want to go digital, or we definitely want to make sure that we use technology in the workplace that is actually meeting the expectations of our employees, right? That's actually very, very important. Not even mentioning that, it's got direct implication on ROI, how the company operates, and also gaining or maintaining the competitive advantage. So there are, it translates into tangible numbers, actually. Okay, something interesting around culture as well. So the way we see the whole, transformation, digital transformation. Oftentimes the discussions I have, we start with tools, but then the next discussion that we have straight away is around culture. Tell me more about your culture so that we can actually see whether the tools that we are trying to sell you whether they're going to be good fit for your organization. Is it compatible with your vision? Is it compatible with your mission that you have in place? Is it something that employees actually want, right? So these are all the questions that we oftentimes ask to make sure that the tools are going to be good fit for the organization. But at the same time, you know, the culture is very important, and I know that especially for this particular audience, I don't have to convince you that it's a key thing for any other changes, right? Basically, I got those statistics, they're fresh. In Q2, PwC ran a survey with the 280 companies, and the results were just basically amazing. As you can see, 67% of people agree that their organization's culture is critical to business success. Those are like all employees, not only C-level people. And 60% agree that culture is more important than strategy or operating model. So how was the line? The culture eats strategy for breakfast? That actually proves it's way much easier to change your strategy than your culture. So moving on to the secret sauce that I would like to present to you today. That's Laszlo. Laszlo is our SVP of, how we call it at Google, People Operations. We've got different teams reporting to Laszlo, starting from, you know, benefits, well-being teams, the interesting discussions that we had today in the morning. And he basically believes that if you give people freedom, they will amaze you. And there is a simple rule that you give people technology, cutting-edge technology, you give them this extra freedom, how they want to execute and using that technology, execute their projects. And you don't have to worry about the performance management because they will do their best to actually deliver on time and deliver great results. So that's what we truly believe in. So basically, Google's culture is based on 3 key pillars. It's mission, transparency, and voice. Basically, when it comes to mission, our mission is simple. It's to organize world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And the fact that every Googler knows that mission is not because, you know, we were told during onboarding process and we have to have this particular sentence on our desks, because we don't have desks. We don't have any desks allocated, actually, so we wouldn't have a chance to put it on our desks. We work from anywhere. But it's the fact that during each and every meeting around our key objectives, around our KPIs, we come back to that vision, to that mission, to make sure that all of us are actually contributing to that mission. Okay? So every conversation I have with my manager, every conversation my manager has got with her manager, it's all about, okay, making sure that we are on the right track while choosing the project, while contributing, while talking about individual teams' missions, that this is actually being very much aligned. Now, the second one, transparency. We share a lot internally. We share lots of confidential data. As you know, every time we have a product launch, we know about it. Everyone at Google knows about it, probably the day before. We have a culture of respecting that confidential information, but the fact that we know that we are being, you know, trusted crowd is actually part of the culture as well. So just to let you know, every week, seriously, every week, our founders, Larry and Sergey, they hold a company-wide meeting. It's called TGIF, thanks Google, it's Friday. Cheesy, I know. But they basically share lots of product updates. They share what's on the agenda, and we know upfront what's going to be the key theme for the particular week. What's the most powerful is that they are in Mountain View in California on stage, so those Googlers sitting in the room can grab a mic and ask live questions. But for those of us who are based in remote offices, we've got so-called moderator, where we submit questions and can upvote or downvote the questions before that meeting. And if our question is not really the most popular, we can also use the social platform to ask that question directly, any of them, right? So you would be very much surprised how difficult and challenging questions people ask. Just to let you know, just to give you an idea, we acquired Nest 1 year ago. It's basically the heating control device. We spent $2 billion on it. And basically, there was one Googler in Mountain View who just grabbed the mic and said like, Larry, I have to ask that question. I know it's not the topic for our week right now, but what on earth have you thought while spending that much money, right? And that was one of the, very direct questions that you would think, well, you have to have guts to stand up and ask that kind of question, Larry Page. But basically, Larry was very calm and responded to that question. In addition, he provided on our social platform on G+, a comprehensive explanation, what is his projection, how it's going to contribute to the overall business, and how we're going to use this particular device, this particular organization, right? So, oftentimes, these are the very challenging questions. Oftentimes, these are certain words of appreciation. And I would say it was very important, especially for us when we grew drastically, when we were joined with Motorola, when we had extra 25,000 people joining us. For the culture, there were plenty of discussions how we're going to preserve that culture. We managed to do that because we think we've done, we kind of got the culture right from the very beginning, and that's what's very important. The last thing that I wanted to mention was voice. So basically, we've got plenty of channels that we can use internally to provide our feedback. Probably the worst thing is to ask people for feedback and don't action on it. So every year when we have our annual, we call it Google Geist, annual employee satisfaction survey, we can see the results per organization. We are being very transparent internally. We can see which organization is healthy, which organization is a little bit troubled, what's the score. And all the Googlers are voting on some of the initiatives that we could implement internally to make sure that we are tackling some of the pain points. So it's on annual basis, it's usually in February. We all, have an opportunity to participate in this process, and then we are being formed, this is really cross-functional effort, being formed in different task forces to actually, let's say fight bureaucracy or improve even more innovation at Google or some other ideas, right? But this is the conversation that we had in the morning from the bottom up, and not really, any of the senior executives telling us, oh, I think we should work on this year, right? So based on the results, that's the voice. And we've got plenty of other channels, starting from, managers' feedback, very important, going through foodback, the feedback on the food quality and all that stuff. There are plenty of channels that we use internally so that our voice is being heard. Okay, some of the insights that I just fish out the most important insights. By the way, we had a book published this year by Laszlo, by Work Rules by Laszlo, who published it in April this year. If you would be a little bit more interested in details around the culture at Google. The very important information is that hiring is probably the most important process to any organization, right? You might have heard the stories, lots of them being stereotypes, about hiring at Google. It's more difficult to get a job at Google than to get to Harvard, basically 6 times more difficult. But basically, we have a very thorough hiring process. But what's very important is that we are not hiring for a role. We are hiring for a cultural fit. And that, I think, is the most important bit, together with the second fact that all the Googlers are involved in the hiring process. What it means is that when we are, for example, hiring for a new person in my organization, there is someone from HR being involved doing the very preliminary screening. But then we have 4 parts of the on-site interview, and usually someone from that team that we are trying to find to fill in the position for, it's basically being active during this hiring process. And this person would say like, oh, I think, I know my other colleagues, I think this person would be a brilliant fit, right? So we basically have 4 categories when it comes to hiring. There is general cognitive ability, there is role-related knowledge, there is leadership, and the last one is called Googliness. And the last one is actually the most interesting one. So Googliness is basically that fit, and what kind of passions this person has, more around soft skills rather than, you know, that very rigid knowledge about certain industry. So just to give you an idea, when I had my job interview at Google 6 years ago, I spent most of the time during this on-site interview talking about my passions, like playing saxophone and speaking Mandarin, rather than anything else. Okay? And we think that's actually a pretty powerful concept. It worked really well for us. And I know that plenty of other organizations are actually shifting a little bit and making changes to their hiring process, because that's the most important bit. So that's insight number one. The other one is the default to open. So that's basically a snapshot from the early TGIFs that we were holding, making sure that we share plenty of data and make sure that we share not only successes internally, but also lessons learned from the failures. That's actually very important. It's absolutely okay at Google to fail, and I will touch on it in a second. But basically, you know, lots of things that we share internally are very confidential. On very rare occasions, that might be a question from your side. Do you have any, you know, are there any leaks? People are actually providing those information to the press if you have the product launch, for example. There are very rare occasions that some Googlers would not respect that rule. But I would say most of us, the majority, knows about the fact that, you know, certain things we simply don't discuss externally, right? So that's rule number one. But we have this privilege of having the sneak peek into that bit of information, and we think that's what actually makes the whole culture a little bit more interesting as well. We truly believe that innovation comes from everywhere, right? Anywhere in the organization, any person can innovate. So, of course, there is a separate organization called Google X. They deal with all that, you know, funky, innovative stuff like driverless cars, like Google Glass, like Project Loon, basically using the balloons to provide internet access in those areas where it's not possible. So these are, as we call it, 10x thinking. But we've got plenty of other opportunities to innovate in our teams. And basically, one thing that we have internally that we run on a regular basis are so-called transformation labs. Basically, what we do, we gather with a team once per quarter for a half-day workshop where we brainstorm on the current processes in our team, and we think like, okay, what's clunky, what's being a pain point, how we can improve it. Of course, there is always a scope to provide that feedback anytime. We can simply speak to our colleagues during weekly meetings and say, like, guys, we should stop doing it or we should improve it. But this particular transformation lab is our luxury time to pause for a second, stop for a minute, and think about, okay, what are we trying to achieve with this particular process, business process, and how potentially it can be improved. And basically, internally, it proved to be extremely successful concept. It's based on the Stanford School for Innovative Thinking. That's a simple framework in Inspire, Explore, Prototype, and Implement. Simple framework. We find the owners for new processes. We check what's basically not working, and we do it internally. It's been so successful that we decided to actually run it with our customers as well. So most of our customers using Google Apps, we just basically sit down with them and go through those processes. So it proved to be extremely successful. Fail fast, launch and iterate. So basically, you know, because there is this culture of innovation. By the way, you know, when it comes to spaces, just to let you know about Wellbeing, Gmail was created by two guys playing ping pong. So that's basically, you know, when it comes to well-being, lots of innovative things are actually being creative in those collaborative areas and not really when people sit at their desks, right? So one thing that I wanted to mention is absolutely okay at Google to fail. We are very much encouraged to actually, you know, try new things, to test new things, but it's absolutely okay to say throughout the quarter that actually the project that I'm running at the moment, I don't think it's going to bring the projected results, and I think I'm going to discontinue. It's absolutely okay to say it. It doesn't have any direct impact on your performance once you have the data to back it up. Okay? And by the way, I just took a snapshot of the Google Graveyard on Pinterest. There are plenty of projects that failed, plenty of products that failed, that were public, but it just proves, innovation is messy, and there's always going to be, a number of projects that turn out to be not really very successful, right? If you don't try new things, you will never innovate. One of the last insights that I would like to mention is around the managers. So we truly believe that people managers are crucial in the organization, and just to foster that innovation internally. So 2 years ago, we decided to scan some exit interviews. Yes, people are leaving Google. Exit interviews just to find out what's the percentage, how many of them thought that, they decided to leave because of a bad manager. And based on that study, we actually got more, deeper, and there is a research right now. It's called Project Oxygen. It's a public knowledge. There is a Harvard Business Review article about it. Highly encourage you to have a look at it. There are basically 8 characteristics of a good manager. One of them is being, for example, don't micromanage. That's rule number 1 at Google. And basically, managers are being partners and not really our bosses. They are not supposed to stand in a way when we are trying to achieve something. And that's being very much visible, right? So that's one thing. And the last thing that, to be honest, I probably don't have to comment on it, and all the statistics were provided by Oliver during the previous session, basically around well-being and creative environment. That's one of the things that actually, makes our left brain work a little bit better. Having those, crazy, creative spaces. But what's more important is actually, I know that's not in every company it's possible to have a slide like that, for example. But having those breakout areas and quiet spaces, as you could see the statistics this morning, it's actually, it's going to motivate people to collaborate better, to have more informal discussions, and bring the innovation, foster that innovation internally in the company. And the last thing I would like to mention, these are my observations, what I've seen in the business. Something that might resonate with you, some things might not. I just would like to, point, to some things. Make sure that you set big objectives to people, and then give them freedom to achieve them. I just want to highlight it. This is very important, right? When you hire people, you give them big objectives, but you're not being prescriptive. This is the process that you need to follow to achieve your goal. Then that's the only case where you will see that people are going to do something different. And the last thing, have fun along the way. Very important. This environment is a clear proof that we have fun. And someone mentioned this morning during the Wellbeing session, I think, that, that was the video, the opening video, that they really like people. Not really work is so much important, but actually people. And that's something that proved to be very true, that holds true at Google as well. We simply like each other. We simply, when someone's leaving Google, the first thing they would write in the note saying goodbye, they would say, like, guys, let's stay in touch because you're just a brilliant crowd. Okay? All right, so that's the last thing. I just would like to leave you with this quote of the very famous man. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't think do we have questions? No, we don't have time for questions, but I will be around if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you very much.